NBC Nightly News. Reported by Connie Chung.
And good evening, I'm Chris Wallace reporting from the NBC newsroom in Washington, and this is one of the extraordinary events in broadcasting history. There has been a fire at the NBC studios at 30 Rockefeller Center in Midtown Manhattan, and the entire building has been evacuated. This happened about 45 minutes ago. We understand that there are no injuries, but Connie Chung and the rest of the NBC production staff was forced to evacuate the building, and so 45 minutes ago we got the word here in Washington that we are to put on tonight's newscast. We will try to give you all of the top news today, but we hope you'll understand it's going to be a very rough broadcast. Our lead today involves First Lady Nancy Reagan, who underwent a modified radical mastectomy this morning after doctors found cancer in her left breast. But there was encouraging news. Preliminary tests show no trace of cancer in her lymph nodes. President Reagan visited his wife in the recovery room and said, "Honey, I know you don't feel like dancing, so let's just hold hands." She's resting now in stable condition, and NBC's Robin Lloyd has more.
After getting the good news that the operation had gone well, a relieved President Reagan arrived back at the White House. The president described his wife as suffering only normal discomfort after the operation.
Feeling just fine. Everything was like that.
Reporters asked him what he told Mrs. Reagan when he was taken in to see her in the recovery room.
You don't really want to know what a fellow says to his wife when they're just in a lonely room together, do you? I express my great happiness.
It was a long day for the Reagans. The president arrived at Bethesda Naval Hospital at 7:15 in the morning, clearly concerned. His aide said he brought the First Lady 24 pink roses. Reporters asked him whether he was praying.
I always do.
The president saw Mrs. Reagan for only 5 minutes before she was wheeled into the operating room. As expected, a biopsy of the lesion on her left breast revealed that it was cancerous. The First Lady had been warned to expect this 11 days ago, when she was first told about the abnormality, a day when she and the president greeted the Japanese crown prince. But the biopsy showed that the lump was small, about 1/4 of an inch in size, and it was something doctors called non-invasive. Cancer experts said this was good news.
The earliest at which these breast cancers are ever detected. It means that the cells haven't spread at all outside of the breast glands.
Even before arriving at the hospital, the First Lady had given the go-ahead for a mastectomy should the lump prove to be malignant. The operation, a modified radical mastectomy, involved removing the breast and the lymph nodes underneath the arm, but not the underlying muscles. The surgery took only 50 minutes, and afterwards, in a written statement, the White House physician, Colonel John Hutton, said there were no complications and no evidence that the cancer had spread. The president was asked how long the First Lady would be in the hospital. He replied, "We don't have a date yet, but it won't be long." White House aides estimated 5 to 7 days. Final laboratory tests, which doctors hope will give the First Lady a complete, clean bill of health, won't be known until tomorrow. But at this point, White House doctors say it does not appear that Mrs. Reagan will need any additional treatment, such as chemotherapy. Robin Lloyd, NBC News at the White House.
I'm joined now by my colleague, White House correspondent Andrea Mitchell, who was there this morning at the White House when the announcement was made that first that the First Lady would have to have the mastectomy, and then second, it appears it was about as good as it can be if you're going to have breast cancer, correct?
Right, Chris. Under those circumstances, this was the best possible outcome. But first of all, it was localized. It had not spread anywhere else in the breast. Second of all, it was only 7 millimeters, which is about a little more than 1/4 of an inch. So it was a very small, concentrated malignancy. And also that it had not, we later learned, spread to the lymph nodes, that once those lymph nodes were examined, at least the preliminary tests, which pretty well are conclusive, they will do some further examination and release those results tomorrow, showed no spread beyond the breast to other parts of her body. So it is a self-contained cancer, and she did choose to have the modified mastectomy so that she knows that she doesn't need any follow-up treatment, chemotherapy, or radiation.
Now, the president looked jaunty, he looked very happy, but what are you told by aides was the impact this has had on him both today and in the preceding days? They've known about this now for about 10 days.
Well, you, of course, know the Reagans very well, have covered them for years. I've covered them for years. And anyone who has watched this couple together is struck by the fact that this is one of the remarkable partnerships. This is a really wonderful relationship. It's one of the rare things that we see in public life. They rely on each other. They are each other's closest advisors and best friends. And people who've been close to the president for the last few days And in fact, those who knew, some people in the White House, 1 or 2 people knew 10 days or 9 days ago, say that he has been very distracted. And it's one of those things in context. Those of us who were with him in New Jersey when he was traveling this week noticed that he was forgetful, that he had made mistakes, and in ad-libbing on the Bork nomination was getting himself into some political difficulty. And apparently, when he got away from that situation in New Jersey, he confided to people around him that he was very distracted and very concerned about Mrs. Reagan's health.
You know, and this, Andrea, this has more than just the obvious impact of a husband and wife. I mean, the fact is that Nancy Reagan has really become perhaps his closest advisor, especially as some of the old guard, like Mike Deaver, has left the administration, Ed Meese is over at Justice. I mean, Nancy Reagan is really his key sounding board, and my guess is one of his best and keenest advisors.
In fact, I think she expressed that best, in fact, to you in your documentary last year when she said that her antennae go up anytime she thinks that people around him are not giving him good advice or are trying to take advantage of him. And she is the one, we are told, who has very significantly urged him to perhaps seek détente, if you want to call it that, with the Soviets. She's been interested in what possibilities there are for arms control, not so much in the substance of arms control, but just in his role in history. And I think that we've seen a very important influence here by Mrs. Reagan, and that's why we're all so encouraged that, in fact, she is healthy and that it looks as though this is going to be a quick recovery.
Andrea Mitchell, thanks for coming in, especially on this very interesting broadcast. And we'll be back with more of NBC News in just a moment.
Out of commercial, you're going to come to Dan Molina and then to Paul.
Reaching for a dream that spells tomorrow. Another generations are coming on. I see America working hard every day to educate her people to live a better way. Now, wouldn't you like to feel another shoulder at the wheel? If you help me join the line, when you pull your weight, then I'll pull mine.
The United Negro College Fund helps turn dreams into achievements.
We want to give our best, please understand. We're not asking for a vote. Just
Little Jessica McClure, who doctors today described as a real fighter, is continuing to recover from dehydration, an injury she suffered from her terrifying experience, trapped in a well for 2.5 days. She underwent surgery today to relieve swelling of her right foot, which doctors are desperately trying to save. NBC's Dan Molina has been covering Jessica's dramatic story and has more details.
Reba McClure was a picture of joy as she unwrapped a present bound to delight her daughter Jessica.
Oh, God, this sucker's heavy.
While Jessica is now stable, her right foot was damaged badly when she fell into the well, and it may have to be amputated.
We still will not be able to tell for a number of days and possibly a week whether we're going to be able to salvage this foot.
There's also serious skin damage on her forehead. The treatment for that?
Slowly inflate the normal skin on each side over a few days and then pull the normal skin over to replace the skin that's dead.
I'm just glad that she is safe. I am so happy that we've got her back. The whole world has her back.
As darkness began to fall yesterday evening, Jessica was slowly, carefully being squeezed from the well where she had been for 2.5 days into a rescue tunnel. Before long, it was clear that this epic ordeal, this labor of the heart, was coming to an end. Watch her touch Steve Forbes, the man carrying her. They did it. The policemen, firemen, oil field workers of Midland had set themselves to the task, and this triumph belonged to them. The gifts from so many who are anxious to share the happiness of Jessica's rescue are piling up at Midland Memorial Hospital. And Jessica?
She said, Mama, that she wants her bottle. And she said, Pooh, Winnie the Pooh.
She's a fighter. Her spirit held on. and she's safe. Dan Molina, NBC News, Midland, Texas.
Michael Deaver, the longtime Reagan intimate, goes on trial Monday on charges of illegal lobbying, using the connections he made while at the White House for his personal benefit. Deaver's trial will be the first ever held under the special prosecutor's law passed in the aftermath of Watergate. Deaver's defense hinges on what he calls a serious drinking problem. And NBC correspondent Jim Polk looks ahead at the trial.
At the White House, Michael Deaver was a secret drinker.
Okay.
Hospitalized once while a Reagan aide, twice more after he left to become a lobbyist, and now a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Deaver's defense when he goes on trial Monday for perjury: his drinking made him forget. His denials before a grand jury were not lies, but lapses of memory. Legal experts say a jury may find that kind of defense hard to swallow.
It's always a gamble with a jury, and especially in a situation like this, because jurors don't like people hiding behind excuses.
The witnesses ready to testify Deaver lied to cover up his lobbying contacts with them range from cabinet names like Elizabeth Dole and George Shultz to former White House officials Robert McFarlane and John Poindexter. But the pivotal witness is certain to be Deaver himself when he takes the stand at the end to tell his story of personal pain.
Trial will last about a month and a half. And just when that is ending next month, another former Reagan aide, Lynn Nossiger, will be going on trial on charges also growing out of his lobbying activities after he left the White House. Chris?
Jim, thanks very much. And we'll be back with more of NBC Nightly News in just a moment. Let's do Ann next.
Get so lonely, you don't want to get out of bed.
What's her problem? She flunked 2 courses and she's afraid to tell her folks.
You tell me where we're going to come up with the money.
Can't you shut that kid up? If you or someone you know is having trouble coping with life's problems, open the door to help.
What would you think if I said that I'm a hemophiliac? You'd probably say, not a chance, he looks too healthy. Well, I could be, but I'm not. Medical research has provided hemophiliacs with an injection of a missing vital protein, enabling a few precious, normal hours of freedom from the occurrence of painful internal bleeding. But their biggest problem is identity. Sometimes they feel as strong and as confident as their friends, and the next thing they know, they're laying in a hospital bed. The Hemophilia Foundation of Southern California is a nonprofit organization providing such programs such as counseling for hemophiliacs and their families, outreach, medical research, scholarships, summer camp, and many self-help educational programs. Their health starts from your heart. For more information, contact the Hemophilia Foundation of Southern California, 33 South Catalina Avenue, Pasadena, California, 91106.
There was tough talk from Secretary of State George Shultz today as he threatened possible retaliation against Iran for its attack on a U.S.-flagged tanker on Friday in the Persian Gulf in the Kuwaiti waters. Shultz said that the U.S. is warning Iran that it runs the risk of American military retaliation by testing the red line of U.S. interests in the Gulf. Schultz said this while on a trip to the Mideast. We are joined now by NBC News State Department correspondent Ann Garrels. And Ann, I suppose the amazing question is, why is there any doubt that the U.S. would retaliate? You would think that this kind of an attack would be a direct affront to U.S. interests, and the U.S. would decide to respond.
Well, in the short term, possibly it might assuage some anger, but in the long term, I think the U.S. has real questions about retaliation. Yesterday, an official said to me, as you see, we haven't done anything, taking that as a sign that probably the U.S. was not going to do anything immediately. First of all, Kuwait has urged that the U.S. exhaust all diplomatic options first. Secondly, the U.S. is trying to get an arms embargo at the UN. It would make it much more difficult to do so. And interestingly, another reason, the U.S. doesn't want to get involved in a all-out war with Iran, which retaliation could suck it into. They've said all along that Iran might be trying to do this.
But, you know, is this one of those cases in the administration where the hardliners are saying, yes, go in, and apparently some of the more moderate people in the Pentagon are concerned about opening up this big door of military involvement? Is this one of those administration splits we're seeing once again?
I don't think so. I haven't really heard any serious talk about retaliation at all. The interesting thing on Friday immediately was everybody was talking a lot, but nobody was really urging action immediately. And even today, Schultz threatened it. He said to Iran and warned them, we have the capability, we have the willingness to use it when we think we should, but he stopped short of that, of saying we're going to do something. I mean, it's a lot of talk, but I think the administration doesn't believe that retaliation is the answer right now.
Isn't there a concern, though, that this really calls into question the whole commitment of the U.S. if we're not even able to protect the U.S. flag ships, let alone all the other tankers sailing through the Gulf? What does that say about the purpose of our whole effort in the Gulf?
Well, I think it raises the very question of the limitations there, and Iran perhaps very cleverly hit it when it was in Kuwaiti waters, not in international waters, that being the definition of the U.S. role in the Gulf. And one has to wonder, in his meetings with King Fahd today, Schultz said, committed himself to the U.S. protection of shipping in the Gulf. But then your point, well, where does that protection begin and end? He also committed himself to protection of Saudi Arabia and to the other Gulf countries. Where does that begin and end? I don't think it raises the question that Congress is asking on the Hill. Where does this policy begin and end? And clearly the administration doesn't know that.
All right. Secretary of State Schultz is in the Mideast. As you say, he met with Saudi's King Fahd today. Is there any hope at all that he can move the logjam in the Middle East in terms of some kind of peace process?
No. And indeed, what Schultz said when he went out there was, I have no new ideas. I'm hoping the parties I'm visiting, Saudi Arabia, the Israelis, King Hussein of Jordan later in London, that they have ideas. He offered no real hope that anything would happen, but said that it was time to go out and review the bidding, as he put it. But I don't think we should anticipate any new initiatives.
Ann Garrow, State Department correspondent, thank you for joining me today. I've never been happier to see you again tonight. Woody Allen said it, everyone's famous for 15 minutes. To the men who filled in during the NFL strike, that was true to a degree. Here's NBC News correspondent Don Oliver.
Steve Jacobson was driving a limousine when he got the call from Miami. Limbo Parks was delivering pizzas for a living. Clyde Glover had a job in a discount store trying to catch shoplifters. They and 1,200 other replacement players were willing to brave the taunts and jeers of NFL strikers for one basic reason. They hope lightning will strike.
Hopefully I can get enough playing time to where they see something that they didn't see in me in the camps, to where maybe they will keep me.
290-pound Tracy Franz had been working as a construction laborer and truck driver. He'd been cut from the 49ers training camp, but still desperately wanted to play football. He left his wife Kathy and their 3 children in Sacramento while he went off to pursue his dream, but she is not complaining.
It means a lot to Tracy, and it means a lot to me. It was so exciting watching him play against the Giants on Monday Night Football on national TV. I'm very optimistic.
Franz was a starting lineman in both games, even co-captain last Sunday. Now he has just one more chance to make his dream come true.
I would like to stay with the team. That'd be real nice.
Mike Hohensee, the replacement quarterback for the Chicago Bears, has a good chance of staying on, according to coach Mike Ditka.
I thought his play was just outstanding.
But Hohensee has no guarantees he'll make the team.
Even if I don't, the experience was good.
Hohensee can take comfort. He'll be welcome back at his previous job, behind the bar at Teddy's 2 in Tyson's Corner, Virginia.
Good all-around bartender.
Most of the replacement players will have to be content with memories of a few moments of glory and autographed game balls.
Knowing that once the game is over, it's time for us to leave, you know, I think it's very sad.
I was getting sick of living life day to day, and at least I know now, you know, what to expect. I know I got one more game at least. I'm just going to play the best I can.
But even those who are going to get cut have an added incentive to do well in the final game. By playing in 3 games, the replacement players become eligible for a share of Super Bowl bonuses if their team makes it. Don Oliver, NBC News, Los Angeles.
U.S. Treasury Secretary James Baker said today that the record fall in stock prices this last week is not the start of a recession. Interviewed on Cable News Network, Baker said, "I don't think it's the start of a recession by a long shot." We're joined now by the chief economics correspondent of NBC News, Irving R. Levine. And Irving, how much concern is there really privately within the administration about this huge drop in the stock market this last week?
Well, there's considerable concern. With an election year approaching, the one thing the administration doesn't want is to see a stock market plunge. Furthermore, no one really can tell whether this is just a temporary correction, that is the stock market term for an interruption of a temporary nature in a bull market, or whether it is really the beginning of something dramatic and drastic.
How much, some people say that the stock market is a very good early leading economic indicator, that it says something about what's really going to happen in the economy, and some people say it has a life of its own. What's your sense of it?
Well, I think in this case, the market does have a life of its own. That is, we have had a tremendous rise, a record rise, and as some members of the administration, including Treasury Secretary James Baker, have pointed out, the market has come down rather a considerable amount, but from very lofty heights. And it is something that a great many people were forecasting. Now, the thing that is of concern is the magnitude of these daily drops. They are records, but percentage-wise, they do not in any way match the drop in the great crash of '29, for example.
What is your sense, though? I mean, it does say something bad about the economy. I mean, it does reflect some underlying concern, doesn't it, about the trade deficit and the budget deficit and the falling dollar and rising interest rates?
You're quite right, Chris. For years now we've been told that the growing budget deficit, which requires government borrowing in competition with other people who want to borrow money, would push up the price of money, that is, interest rates. So far that hasn't happened. But finally, the bullet in the Russian roulette revolver may have hit, and that is interest rates are going up, and once interest rates go up, that provides a competition for funds which otherwise would go into the stock market. And so what we may be seeing is finally the price, the penalty of these enormous budget deficits. And if that proves to be the case, then the pressure is going to be on the new chairman of the Federal Reserve, Alan Greenspan, to bring down interest rates, and that's going to place him really on the horns of a dilemma.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Here is a man, Alan Greenspan, appointed by a Republican president. Politics might tell him to lower interest rates. Economic theory might tell him to raise interest rates.
Precisely right. Now, you must remember that the Federal Reserve did raise its discount rate, that is the rate that it charges banks, just last month. And it did so, as the Fed explained at the time, because it saw the first inklings of inflation. And the way to squeeze out inflation is to raise interest rates. That faces Alan Greenspan with the dilemma. Should he continue the fight against inflation, or should he reverse course, bring interest rates down in order to make the stock market and all the psychological factors that go with a rise in the stock market attractive again?
Let's get into one last area, and that is the whole area of this huge budget deficit. We now have this Graham-Rudman law that says automatically on November 20th the deficit will be cut by $23 billion. Do you think, on the other hand, they'll be able to avoid the automatic cut and work out some kind of compromise between the White House and Capitol Hill?
Well, of course, Congress realizes that the president has threatened to veto any kind of tax increase. The Congress, in the form of the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee, have passed measures raising taxes by about $12 billion. The president will be faced with a choice, either to accept cuts in military spending or to accept these tax increases. If he doesn't do this, then the automatic trigger goes into effect and these cuts across the board take place. Now, the Democrats may find that this will boomerang against them. Why? Because the cuts in domestic programs will hit precisely those programs which benefit the traditional Democratic constituencies. But you might say, how about the cuts in military spending? Well, the fact of the matter is that the Pentagon always has money squirreled away. And so if the automatic cuts go into effect, which the president may be willing to accept, the military may not suffer. The Democrats and the programs which benefit their traditional constituencies may be the ones that are hurt.
Irving R. Levine, thanks very much for coming in. We've got the whole Bureau working tonight, don't we?
We sure do.
Thanks very much. And we'll be back with more of NBC Nightly News in just a moment.
October is National Lupus Awareness Month. Lupus is still a little-known and frequently misunderstood disease. We're the Lupus Foundation of America. We're working to educate all Americans and fighting to find the cause and cure of lupus. the Lupus Foundation of America. We can help.
Call 1-800-544-9779 for further information.
What if I told you that the government of the United States had been overthrown and the new regime had issued laws saying that you could be arrested because your father was a trade union member? You lent your motorcycle to the wrong person. You're watching this program.
Impossible? We at Amnesty International know that no political system automatically protects human rights. Amnesty International has helped to bring about the release of tens of thousands of prisoners of conscience. People imprisoned and often tortured or executed just for holding the wrong political views, expressing the wrong opinions, believing in the wrong religions, or belonging to the wrong ethnic groups. Join us.
To get more information, please write to us. Amnesty International USA, Post Office Box 37137, Washington, D.C. 20013.
Amnesty International is a conspiracy of hope.
In some parts of the country today saw somewhat warmer weather, but it is only a brief pause in an annual rite of beauty, the glorious changing colors of fall. NBC correspondent Fred Briggs, a long-time observer of things beautiful, looks at the colors of New England, even this early in the season.
New Englanders would be justified in guarding their autumns like national treasures, but they enjoy sharing their leaves, their colors, with all who come to see them. A scientist will explain that these colors were always in each leaf ever since it was first formed in spring. They show up now only because the tree cuts off all the chlorophyll that made them green. Fine. But far better to see, to marvel, not analyze this vivid interlude between summer and winter. Arlo Sterner marvels even after 30 years as forester for Lamoille County, Vermont. He can tell you what color each tree in the county will turn, but not always when. Even two trees the same age, size, and species may change a few days apart. Does each tree have its own timetable about when it's going to turn?
No, it's just the genetics of the thing, really. Some people get white hair like you and I quicker than we should, maybe. Some people that are
I'll go along with that.
Mine are still got dark hair, you know.
This autumn crossed the border from Canada in a hurry with an early snow at its heels. But that didn't discourage the tourists, about 1 million of them, who came to do autumn kinds of things and take the fall air the way Europeans take the waters. They take to the air, some of them. Some picked the last of the year's apples.
There you go.
Others watched apples being pressed into service for the thirsty. It's an exhilarating time, but all too brief. Each tree is an emperor doomed to shed its colorful clothing until spring. And the season to come is not for the faint of heart or thin of blood.
And finally, we close with a story about ourselves. A fire in a consolidated Edison transformer today sent dense smoke through the NBC headquarters in Midtown Manhattan, forcing the evacuation of the entire 65-story building and resulting in the fact that Connie Chung and the entire production staff also had to leave the building. And we did NBC Nightly News tonight from here in Washington. We would like to tell you, of course, that NBC programming will go on as scheduled tonight. I'm Chris Wallace in Washington. For all of us here at NBC News, have a good Saturday night.
Coming up in just a minute on The Scene at 6, AIDS and the church. Some religious leaders get advice on how to deal with AIDS in their congregations. In Bordeaux, residents say they've had their fill of the Metro landfill. They want the city to move it someplace else soon. Some Vietnam veterans are on patrol in Middle Tennessee. And in Kingston Springs, neighbors are worried about some very unusual pets.
These stories